I'm Mike Stahlman, and you are listening to Gospel Tangents.
It's the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to introduce Mike Stahlman. He's not LDS, but he is a member of the Restoration. We're going to learn more about him and his conversion to one of the Restoration branches. And Mike is definitely a puzzle solver, so we'll learn more about this. He's kind of the Scotty, the chief engineer, in rebuilding the Phoenicia ship, so you don't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm excited to have one of the best engineers on the Phoenicia ship. Could you go ahead and tell us who you are and where you're from?
My name is Mike Stahlman. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I lived there for 33 years, and then I gathered to the center place in Independence, where I've lived for the last 33 years.
Oh, so you've been both places. So are you, I'm trying to find out, is your background LDS or Community of Christ, or it sounds like you've been in both of the major cities there?
Well, I was actually raised Catholic.
Okay.
And I had my conversion experience where I met our Lord and Savior when I was 20 years old.
Okay.
And at which point I joined what was then known as the RLDS. And I have an absolutely unshakable belief and faith in the Book of Mormon. And the RLDS, for all intents and purposes, no longer exists. And I am a member of what is known as an independent restoration branch, who are former members of RLDS who did not want to go along with the direction that the now Community of Christ decided to go.
Okay. I don't know if you know Patrick McKay. Do you know Patrick?
Yes, I do.
Patrick, I just interviewed him. He's going to be on here next week. He's an apostle with the JCRB. Would you be considered part of the Joint Conference of Restoration Branches?
No. Actually, the groups that are part of the movement that I'm in are simply congregations that were ruled out of order by the RLDS and basically kicked out of their buildings. So those groups bought their own buildings and have remained as independent congregations until now. The JCRB, some of those congregations banded together to form the JCRB, but quite a few didn't. So I frequent the ones that didn't.
Okay.
Though I've got nothing against them, and I'll attend their services, and I'm friends with many of them. There's no animosity. It's just that scripturally, I didn't feel I could go that way.
Okay. So does your branch have a specific name?
There's several that my wife and I attend. The one we've been going to lately is known as the South Chrysler Restoration Branch, because their church had originally been on South Chrysler Street in Independence, but their new build, once they were kicked out and had to get a new building, it's now on Salisbury Street. So it's a little confusing, the name South Chrysler, but you're not on Chrysler Street.
Okay. I drove by there a few years ago. Wish I could remember that guy's name. I'll have to show you a picture later and see if you know him. But they were working on the fence. I always thought it was Chrysler Street, but you say Chrysler, huh?
You're correct. It's Chrysler.
Like, yeah, I'm trying to remember. Anyway, that's interesting. All right. So how did you get involved with the Phoenicia?
Well, I was following Wayne May for years. I used to get his magazine, and I attended several of his conferences, specifically one in Nauvoo. And so I got to know Wayne personally and became friends with him. And when he announced that he had located what he believed was a location of the temple in Zarahemla, just right across the river from Nauvoo, I decided I needed to go up and check it out. Wayne was wanting to do a dig at the site. They had done previous digs, but they had done some ground-penetrating radar, and they located what they thought were anomalies in the ground. So they wanted to dig down and excavate those. So I had a Bobcat 331 mini excavator. So I volunteered to bring it up and do the digging for him. And then after that, the Heartland Research Organization was doing some side scan sonar in the river, looking for a possible site where the armies could have crossed. Again, that was, to me, was extremely interesting. So I went up and right at the very end of that. And then that was when Wayne actually took me over and showed me the temple site. That was the first time I'd seen it. Then I found out later, Wayne had let me know that they were getting some high-tech instruments from Germany to do magnetometer scan of the temple site. And they ended up scanning like 250 acres in total. So I went up and joined that expedition, and at which time, that's when I joined the Heartland Research Organization. And then when Mike and John brought up the possibility of purchasing the Phoenicia, and
John Lefgren and Mike LaFontaine,
John
right?
Lefgren and Mike LaFontaine brought up the possibility, but it was cut into pieces, so it was going to be, we wouldn't be buying a ship, we'd be buying pieces of a ship. They asked me what I thought about it, and then having to put it back together, and I said, it'll be fun. So I more or less at that point volunteered to help put it together, and which is exactly what happened.
Okay.
Now I've had some experience in timber frame construction in Pennsylvania. I used to repair timber framed barns. There'd be rotten timbers in it, and you'd have to remove the rotten timber without the barn falling down and work a new one in there. So I'm used to working with timbers, but working on a ship is a little something new. But I've always loved puzzles. I'm a very good puzzle solver, and it's kind of like a puzzle. When they took the ship apart, each piece and panel was numbered, but there was no key supplied, a map, as it were, to show which piece went where. So we had to figure that out. But I have a background in engineering and construction. I've worked all my life in various phases of construction, commercial, industrial, concrete, electricity. I've been an electrician. I've been a plumber. I've been a framer.
I understand you're a Nittany Lion. Is that right? Sort of.
A what?
A Nittany Lion, Penn State.
Oh, yes.
You must not be a sports fan.
Not a Nittany Lion, but I was never really into college football, but I was a big Steelers fan.
Oh, okay.
And now I'm a Chiefs fan.
Okay.
But I believe that everything that's happened in my life, all the different aspects that I've worked on, was being prepared by the Lord to work on this ship. There's a lot of people say, "Are you a shipbuilder?" I said, "Well, I am now." There's a lot
just like Nephi, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects involved in there that you can't really put into a cubby hole, but it takes a wide knowledge of different aspects of different construction trades. I mean, we drill holes, we use bolts, we use steel plates. Going to be some welding involved, and I've had experience in all those areas. But I think one of the biggest things is the puzzle aspect. It really is quite a puzzle. And then once you figure out where the piece came from and where it needs to go, you have to figure out how to get it into that position, which sometimes is tricky because you need it to go in two directions at once, and you need it to go over and down, and movement in either direction blocks the movement in the other. So it's kind of a dance to get the piece to go in.
So so for people who don't know, basically the Phoenicia ship made two trips, one around Africa, from the Middle East all the way around to Africa, and then the other one was through the Mediterranean Sea, and then they went over to Florida. And so what I understand, can you tell us what happened after that, so that people understand why the ship is in pieces now?
Mike LaFontaine might be better to answer that because he was actually there in Florida and saw what happened. But basically, the ship, and Mike can fill in the details. The ship spent some time at the bottom of the harbor in Florida. It sank because of the hurricane. And when they pulled it back up out, there was nowhere for it to go because of COVID, and no museums were interested in it at that time. Prior to COVID, there was tremendous interest. But during COVID, nobody was going to museums. The museums were not having any income, so they couldn't make any purchases. So the captain...
Yeah, so it was going to go to England originally.
The captain had to get it back to England, and the only way he could do it was to cut it up and put it into containers and ship it back. And that's when Heartland Research Organization stepped in and said, well, don't send it to England. Let's send it up to Iowa.
Half of it did go to England, right?
It was already on the sea, on its way to England, but the other half was still here.
Okay.
So let's take the other half, instead of sending it to England, send it to Iowa, and let's get the one that's on its way to England, do a U-turn, and get it to come back.
Okay. And so now you've got a ship that's been cut into pieces, and you have to put it back together.
Right, and that was the second half of the ship arrived first. So we have the back half of the ship, and it arrived in Montrose in a container on a snowy night when we really didn't have any way to unload it and nowhere to put it. But before that day was over, John had found a building, rented a building, and the ship was a big crane appeared out of nowhere, literally, and we got it unloaded and got the container sitting right in front of that building, which then subsequently we unloaded and put it in the building, and it was just a giant, like a box of Legos dumped out on the ground. And so we started sorting them out and trying to make sense of what we had, and trying to decipher what the numbers on them might mean. And by taking a very close examination of the individual boards, we could discern, well, the grain pattern on this board continues across onto the grain pattern on that board, so these two must have been together. So taking that little bit of information, we extrapolated then what the numbers might mean. And so we were able to get them figured out and sorted. And then our first job was to take the keel, which wasn't numbered, but the keel itself was cut into sections. But we could examine the cut and the angle was slightly off and find the piece that matched it and get them lined out and figure out how we could rejoin them in a way that would be structurally sound. And so once we got the keel laid, then we could start at the one end and figure out which piece went first. And once we got that in, then it really started to take off. Then we were able to sort out each piece, and we now know exactly where each piece goes, in what sequence, in what row. So we started putting it together, and we're one panel shy of having half the panels that we have in our possession now reassembled. So there's other work besides just putting the hull together, but as far as the hull itself, we have half the keel assembled and about 1/4 of the total hull.
And the keel is the bottom of the boat for those of us who aren't shipbuilders, is that right?
True. It's the keel is the bottom backbone of the boat. The Phoenicia doesn't have a keel board that extends down for stability. It's basically a flat bottom boat. But the timbers on the side are about 6.5 inches wide or so, 2 inches thick. The keel is about the size of a railroad tie, if you can picture what that would be. And the first planks attached to the heel, to the keel, and then it comes up like this. So the keel, a very solid piece of timber on the bottom, very hard, but it's not a tremendously deep keel. It's actually a shallow draft, flat bottom boat, which makes the boat kind of able to rock side to side quite a bit when it's in the open ocean. So if a person is prone to seasickness, they probably wouldn't want to be on that boat. It's very, very strong, very sturdy, but does have a tendency to rock a little bit more than you'd probably like.
Well, very good. All right. So, so your main job has been to, I mean, this is kind of a three-dimensional puzzle, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, so you've got a background in engineering, is that right? Or you at least started engineering at Penn State?
Yes. I had a lot of engineers in my family, brothers, uncles, or a brother and a couple uncles, and it was always expected that I would be an engineer. My grades were good enough; it shouldn't have been a problem. So I attended Penn State University for 2 years, and simply decided engineering wasn't my thing. Though I did study engineering and surveying, so I decided to go back out into the construction trades. Before I went to school for engineering, I actually worked in construction as a young man. After school evenings, I worked on modular homes. There was a factory that built modular homes. I worked in there for a couple summers. So my real interest was in construction and building. And so I framed houses. I was an electrician. I was a plumber. I worked in a sawmill at one time. And then I started a painting business, painting buildings. And then I got into repairing timber frame barns. And there's a lot of old falling down barns in Pennsylvania. And at that time, there was a lot of money from the coal mining, and the farmers would get royalties for coal taken off their land. And the first thing they wanted to do was fix up their old barn. So it was quite a bit of work fixing up old timber frame barns that were ready to fall down. And I was about the only person in the western half of the state that was doing it. So I had my pick and choice of the jobs. And that's what I had been doing a couple years prior to moving out here. I did a stint as a building maintenance in town, a lot of commercial buildings. I took care of the boilers and the heating and the plumbing in these buildings. And then I moved out here to Missouri and started a house building business. I built a few houses, but then I switched to concrete, did nothing but concrete. First it was residential, then it was commercial. And then I started working on cell phone towers, doing site work, running the electrical conduit and the grounding and the concrete foundation for the towers. And my two sons were old enough, were working with me. We traveled all over the Midwest, putting in cell phone tower foundations. And then I stopped doing that, and I got tired of being away from home all the time. So we started concentrating on convenience store parking lots. My sons and I and guys we had working for us poured concrete parking lots. Our record pour was we poured an acre of concrete one day, 60,000 square feet. Me and 14 other guys there. It was for the fire department there. It built a fire training facility. Then I retired, and it was right about the time I retired that was when I started. I had more time, and I was able to run up to Iowa and join the Heartland Research Group. That if I hadn't been retired, I wouldn't have been free to do that. So that was fortuitous, the timing. But the Lord's timing is perfect, and I truly believe that He has led me through my life's path to get me to the point where I'm now able to be here and help put this boat back together, and so that this message of the contact between the old world and the new, the actual positive physical trip that Captain Beale did, validates the two of the three migration stories that are in the Book of Mormon. And of course, Captain Beale knew nothing about these stories, and he was simply trying to prove that Phoenicians had a rightful place in history and that they could have made these trips. And just coincidentally, they're two of the trips in the Book of Mormon.
Interesting. And so how far is Independence from Montrose?
About a 4.5 hour trip, 5 hours if I stop to fill up for gas.
Right. So it's a little bit of a jaunt there.
Yeah, it's not bad. I don't mind driving. Some like truck drivers, they drive all day, every day for a living, and they manage. It's not a bad trip.
Okay. And so you're kind of the head construction engineer on reconstructing the ship?
Right. Mike LaFontaine is actually in charge, but I probably have the head and the understanding of what needs to be done structurally. And Mike has a lot of good ideas too, as far as wood joinery, how we should attach the pieces. But as far as making sure it's going to be structurally sound, I have a good feel for what timbers do. Understand loading tables, what's different spans, what kind of weight they can bear, what type of attachments have the best strength, and so on.
So I know, and I guess this boat will never be seaworthy again, right?
It's not planned to ever put it back in the water, but structurally it would be sound enough to sail. We've made no efforts to waterproof it, but theoretically it could be waterproofed and could be put back on the ocean. Structurally it would be capable of it. It would just be a matter of making sure it was all sealed up. We'd have to caulk the joints, and the simplest way would just be to put a coat of fiberglass over fiberglass mat and resin over the outside.
Although I don't think the Phoenicians had fiberglass back then, did they?
Right. They didn't build their boats out of little pieces like Legos either. So they didn't have the issue of not only the horizontal joints leaking, but the vertical joints where it was cut. Yeah. That's the real problem.
Right. So, because I did notice in there, you guys are using a lot of modern tools and modern techniques. But I guess the original ship, did they use power tools and that sort of thing to build it? Do you know?
Well, as far as we know, they didn't. There's a lot of people with fringe theories about what technology they may or may not have had, but it's simply a matter of methods and not design. We have to make a hole. They'd have drilled the holes by hand, and we have the advantage, instead of having to hand turn the drill, we just turn the drill with an electric motor. But we're doing the same thing. We're simply making a hole in the side of the plank. And the tenons, they probably made with draw knives, where we'll run them through the table saw and round them over with a belt sander. But it's the exact same tenon, and they would have just done everything with hand tools. It would have taken them longer. But we're not doing anything different as far as design. We're just doing the using the advantage of electrical power to turn our bits and our saws, where they would have done everything by hand.
Because one of the things that I think I heard in one of the videos, they believe the Phoenicians used nails, which was a brand new technology for them. Are you using modern nails, or are they trying to be Phoenician nails? Or?
Well, we've had some iron hand wrought nails made that are identical to the nails they used, but a lot of the ribs are still attached to the planks, so we don't have to put when they cut the hull into sections, the rib section with each corresponding panel for the most part remained in place, so they're already attached. We're using quite a few screws instead of nails.
Because those will hold it tighter, basically, stronger.
It'll be stronger than the grip that the Dale had. There'll be less movement. There'll be less slippage. We're trying to remain as authentic as possible, yet doesn't need to be 100% authentic as far as the methods that are used to put it back together. It's the original boards, it's the original pieces of wood that made the voyage. Whenever we add a screw here and there to tighten things up or to draw things together, consider it an upgrade.
Okay. Yeah, well, cool. I'm trying to think of what else is there. What else should we know about what you do on the Phoenicia?
Well, it's not quite as glamorous as it sounds. There's a lot of time-consuming, dirty work cleaning the panels up. There's dirt and stains and years on the ocean have kind of left the pieces. On the outside of the panels, they were covered with an anti-fouling compound to keep the barnacles from attaching, but more importantly, to keep the ship worms from eating the wood. When you put a wood chip in the ocean, first thing that happens, there's these worms. The tiny larvae of these worms are floating around in the water, and they attach to any piece of wood, and they burrow in there and they want to make a home. So they put this coating on a wood chip to prevent that. Well, as you pointed out, the Phoenicians did things a little different than we do nowadays. So in order to restore the boat and get it back more to what it would have been if it had been built 600 BC, we're removing the anti-fouling compound. We're just going to take it down to the bare wood. And that is some pretty tough stuff. It's got copper in it. It's got epoxy in it. Oh. It doesn't just come off with paint stripper. There's a lot of we use heat and scrapers and manual labor, and then once it's off, there's still a residue. So there's a sanding involved. And on the inside, basically, we just power wash it. And that power washing does a pretty good job taking it down to the bare wood on the inside. So it's about 40 hours worth of labor to get one section ready. So that's where volunteers are very helpful. We have a lot of people coming up and volunteering, and they help clean the panels. To take one panel and attach it to the ship only takes about an hour for the initial attachment, and then that's followed up with maybe another hour of actually securing it and restoring the structural integrity of that piece against the next one. So most of the time is in prep work, and we have and moving the pieces around inside the shop. They're kind of heavy.
Yeah, I bet. And so the hull is basically almost done right now. Is that correct?
We have right now we have one half of the ship in Montrose, and it's the back half of the ship. Of that half of the ship, we have the entire keel section put together, except for one piece on the very back end that goes way up high. We're going to save that for last. Okay. Once that gets on there, it's going to be hard to move the ship. Don't think it would fit out the door with that piece installed. The door's only 20 foot high, and that piece sticks up higher than that. But the ceiling in the building's high enough to do it. Now, of the panels, we are one panel short of having half the panels installed of the half ship we have. So if you do the math, that's 1/4 of the hull. Okay. Half the keel and 1/4 of the hull has been installed. Then after that's together, quite a bit of the railing, which is on the very uppermost row that we'll be working on, quite a bit of that railing is going to have to be replaced due to rot. So even though we have 1/4 of the hull done and half the keel, we're not as far along as that would make it sound. There's a lot of ancillary work. We're going to have to put the lower deck in. We're going to have to put the upper deck in. We don't have the deck. The deck will be a complete reproduction. We've located some cedar in Iowa that we'll be using for the deck boards.
Not the cedars of Lebanon, huh?
No, it won't be the cedars of Lebanon, but it will be cedar. And and we don't have the sail built yet. We don't have the mast, so we're not as far along as initially you'd think with those numbers that I gave you. There's still quite a bit of other work involved.
How long do you anticipate this will take to rebuild the whole ship?
There's a lot of variable there. Exactly, how many volunteers we get, how many hours per week we're able to put in. Say estimate was run anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years it'll take? Oh, wow. This is a big project. So if people want to volunteer, how do they volunteer?
Contact a Heartland Research Group.
Okay.
There's Phoenicia Rocks.
Phoenicia.rocks, that's the website?
Yeah.
So not .com, it's .rocks.
Yes, that's correct.
And then they can just sign in to volunteer there for...
They get all sorts of contact information right there.
Okay. And of course you can see videos at that website and everything.
Yes.
Anything else we should know about that? I guess there's a gift store there as well.
The building that it's in doesn't have an official name. We call it the Phoenicia Museum or the Phoenicia Shop. And inside the shop there's an area that's been set up. It's actually a tent that makes a little room that there's the gift shop, and there's information in there. There's a video that you can watch of Captain Beale making a trip. We have a big screen TV in there. You can sit down, you can see the presentation. It kind of fills you in about the whole project from start to finish. And we have even if someone would like, we've got little pieces of the old tenons that we took out. See, when they cut the ship in half, they cut it horizontally. They cut the tenon in half. This is totally of no use to put the ship back together. So we pull half the tenon out of the top panel and half the tenon out of the bottom panel, and the two pegs that were holding it together. And we really can't use them in a restoration ship. We've made new tenons. We got some English walnut, which is or Mediterranean walnut, was what the original tenons were made out of, and we replicated the tenons exact size and shape. So we have the new tenons. Well, the old ones, you can purchase those there at the gift shop if you want a souvenir of the ship. But people that come up there, they love to come in there and touch it, put their hand on it, and feel this is a very visceral, solid, big, as far as we're concerned, artifact from the Book of Mormon times. Even though it was built in modern times, it's a replica of the ship that brought young Prince Mulek to the New World. So when you're touching that ship, you're touching the spirit of that trip, and it makes that trip real. This isn't the ship he came on, but this is just what it looked like. This is the exact same type of ship. This is a model. This is a recreation of that ship that he would have came over on.
Very cool, very cool. All right, well, I think I'm out of questions. Is there anything we're missing? What am I missing?
My wife, she says, well, I don't need physical evidence to believe in the Book of Mormon. I believe it's true. And that's excellent if a person can be like that. But in the New Testament, when Christ would appear to his disciples, he would say, come here. He says, I want you to touch the prints in my hands. I want you to thrust your hand in my side. They already had faith. They believed in the Savior. They believed in Jesus. And now he's standing before them resurrected. Your faith can't get any greater than that. Yet he knew the mind, faith exists. But we do have a physicality to us. We do have a physical body. He says, not only do I want you to have faith in me, he says, I want you to come here. I says, I want you to touch me physically. I want you to have physical proof as well. So the Lord himself wanted us to have physical proof. So we now have something that you can come and touch. A very real, a very physical object.
All right. Well, Mike Stahlman, what do we call you? Chief Engineer of the Phoenicia? Is that what we should call you?
They call me the homeless guy.
The homeless guy. I'm not going to put that on there. We'll call you the chief engineer. You're the Scotty of the Phoenicia, right?
Yeah, that would be apt.
Give me a Captain, I'm giving her all she's got.
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. It's going to take at least an hour to get it fixed. But I'll have it done in 5 minutes.
You'll get the dilithium crystals and we'll be fine. All right. Well, Mike Stahlman, thank you so much for being here on Gospel Tangents. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Mike Stahlman. Mike, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and I'm excited to come out to the Iowa Museum and check out the Phoenicia and see all your handiwork. In our next conversation, I'm excited to introduce David Hawking. He's written some annotated scriptures, like the New Testament here, and so we're going to learn a little bit more about him and the amazing scriptures that he's put together. These are pretty cool.
And so in 1867, the reorganized church published it, and so this is in the public domain, the text, and so I went ahead and felt that would be important. We, as members of the Utah Mormon Church, if you want to call it that, we've never had the full benefit of everything that Joseph Smith did by way of commandment. And because of that, I felt that since next year would be Come Follow Me in the New Testament, what better opportunity for we as church members to actually read what Joseph Smith contributed. So this is my latest book.
If you like what we're doing here on Gospel Tangents, please become a paid subscriber at gospeltangents.com or patreon.com/gospeltangents. We've got full transcripts on our website at gospeltangents.com. And if you'd like to check out some of our other conversations, click over here. Thanks.